Hello, this is a promo video for an upcoming workshop that I am teaching. The workshop is about what it's like to grow up with a narcissistic parent, and also the workshop is about the common struggles of being an adult, having had a narcissistic parent as a child. The workshop is on Sunday, July 27th, 2025. The workshop is for 4 hours. It is through the Healthy Gamer organization, if you're familiar. Dr. K asked me to provide this workshop, and you can click the link below for more information. From my understanding, space is limited, so if you're interested, you might want to sign up ASAP. My name, if you don't know, is Dr. Kirk Honda, and I have been a therapist and a professor for almost 30 years now. And one of my specialties has been working with clients with narcissistic personality disorder. I've also treated children and families of narcissistic individuals. So I've seen the effects that narcissism can have on parenting and also on the children, which can be profound, unfortunately. So in this promo video, I want to give a quick intro on the workshop by talking a little bit about narcissism. So on the internet, there's a lot of talk about narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder or narcissists. But in my experience, 99% or even more than that, 99.9% of what is talked about on the internet about narcissism is completely wrong, which makes sense because personality disorders in general are very difficult to understand. You can be a clinician and have gone through graduate school and still not really understand it. It requires a lot of extra learning and experience, and you have to have good mentors. So it's hard. And research even shows that most therapists don't really understand narcissism, even though they don't know. So in my workshop, I want to quickly clear that up, because something to keep in mind is that people with narcissism, people with narcissistic personality disorder, they're all different. There are many types, and also people are just different. They're the classic types, like where someone brags all the time, but there are many other presentations that are often under the radar. You might not even know you have narcissism yourself because of the way it's talked about on the internet. So in a nutshell, people with narcissistic personality disorder, they are in a constant struggle against the notion that they are worthless, that they have no value, that they're inferior. That is the primary trauma from their very early childhood, 0 to 3 years old. And their defense, their solution is through grandiose self-image and by making sure everyone else sees them that way. So they are in a constant struggle to establish themselves not only as good enough, but as superior, because that's making sure that they're not worthless, they're overcompensating. So they need everyone to understand for sure that they are superior. They need everyone to believe that, but they also need to convince themselves. It's an internal struggle as much as it is an external struggle. So when the narcissistic person has a child, then naturally their parenting style, the narcissistic parent, is going to parent in a narcissistic way. And there are 3 different categories that differentiate narcissistic parents from other parents. One is that the narcissistic parent needs the child to see the parent as superior. And it's complicated, but it's definitely a part of it, right? And this can end up being abusive, unfortunately, but not always. The second effect is that the narcissistic parent needs the child to be superior to other children because the child is an extension of the narcissistic parent, right? So the narcissistic parent might demand that the child be perfect in school or in sports, or they might require the child to look perfectly, or when the child grows up, the child needs to go to the perfect school or the most prestigious job opportunities, that kind of thing. A third effect is that the parent often feels like they're in competition with the child, which is very interesting, right? But unfortunately, it can manifest this way. So you can have a narcissistic parent who is threatened when their 10-year-old child gets an award at school or something. So, so the children are pushed and pulled in both ways. They're required to be superior, but at the same time, not so superior that they're more superior than the parent. And different days can look differently. And again, every parent is different. There's different manifestations of this, but I'm going to be going into those effects in the workshop. I'm also going to be discussing research. For example, Day et al. Study in 2021 found a lot of themes of what it's like to be a child of a narcissistic parent. But just to highlight two right now, that they found that the narcissistic parent will engulf the child into their world so that the child ends up participating in it unconsciously themselves as a way to survive, right? So they found that the child and parent will alternate between the states that the narcissistic person often is alternating between feeling superior and grandiose and awesome and relatively stable. But when triggered, the duo will actually feel worthless and devalued. It's complicated, but the child will get engulfed into that oscillation, and they found that the child participates in it themselves. So when the child grows up and is an adult, they can continue that cycle, sometimes, not always. Another effect that they found, a theme that they found in the study, was that the children are naturally very angry at the parents, particularly if they were abused. But they also found that the children were still fused, I'm using my language, but they were fused with the narcissistic parent. They were still really emotionally involved. Even if the narcissistic parent had died, the adult child of a narcissistic parent was still very much in that world and was still having a hard time extracting their mind and body and that kind of stuff. So, which makes sense, right? Because you never got the love and attention that you deserved, and so you keep kind of barking up that tree. It's complicated, but that's just another fight. Anyway, so, for these reasons and many others, these children of narcissistic parents, they need a lot of help, right? But it's really hard to recover from this because in a lot of ways, it's like trying to extract yourself from a cult because you have been living in this world of the narcissistic parent your whole life. It's all that you know, and it's not the real world. It's the world of the narcissistic parent, and there's a lot of demands on it. Also, the child is often denied attunement and love and the free space to explore who they are, and so the adult child often doesn't know who they are yet. So you have to dismantle the internalized cult. This is my language. And then once that's sufficiently dismantled, you have to rebuild. You have to start from scratch. Who am I? What am I? What's real? What's not? Am I an okay person? What is this? It's hard. So naturally, long-term therapy is often recommended. But the problem is that in my experience anyway, a lot of therapists don't know how to treat adult children of narcissistic parents. I mean, they have a hard time treating people with narcissism as well. So it makes sense, right? Because this cult extraction can be pretty complicated. The client might even know, they might have insight like, oh, that was wrong that I was taught that, but it's sometimes really stubborn the way that it can become entrenched in the person. Anyway, it's complicated. But another major complication to the therapy is that the transference, countertransference dynamic between the client and the therapist can be extremely difficult to navigate as a therapist. And so not every therapist knows how to navigate that in general, and particularly this kind of transference, countertransference. What can happen, unfortunately, a lot of times is that these adult children of narcissistic parents will engage in the transference, countertransference. The therapist doesn't know how to manage it, doesn't know how to provide the corrective experience, and the client will blow out of therapy for one reason or another. But anyway, so I might get into a little bit of that, but not in detail because we only have 4 hours. But anyway, so in this workshop, what you will learn is what exactly is narcissistic personality disorder. What are the common myths? What is it like to have a narcissistic parent? What are the long-term effects of having a narcissistic parent, as an adult? What are the common pitfalls as an adult in relationships and in life and jobs, that kind of stuff? And also, briefly, to some extent, how do you recover and heal? The reason why I say briefly is because that's way more complicated than I can instruct in a short amount of time. So my teaching style has always been, in the past, since I've been a professor since the late 90s, has always been that I will provide a short lecture, like 15, 10 minutes, 20 minutes or so, and then give time. I will instruct the students to silently reflect, maybe jot some notes down. I find that this is important because if I just lecture the whole time, that's too much information. You need time to breathe. You need time to reflect and integrate. think of questions or apply it to your own life, that kind of thing. And then there'll be a short discussion. I don't like long discussions. As a student, I didn't like it when class became this endless discussion. So it's pretty short, maybe 3 to 5 minutes. Students are given a chance to share or to ask questions, but mostly to share what they are integrating. This is important because people often think of things that I didn't think to touch on, but also because it provides the practical application of all these things, right? When people say, oh, and then other students can learn from that. It's always the hope. Anyway, so who this workshop is for, obviously, if you're an adult child of a narcissistic parent, then this would be a workshop you might be interested in. But also, if you have a spouse or partner who is an adult child of a narcissistic parent, you might want to take this workshop as a way of understanding your spouse better, as a way to better support them. Also, I'd imagine clinicians might be interested in this. It's not geared towards clinicians, but there's clinical aspects that you can pull away from it. Also, I was thinking it might be interesting for people who are on the narcissistic spectrum, particularly if they're a parent or they're thinking about becoming a parent, right? Also, I was imagining that people that are interested just in general in narcissism or psychology in general might like this workshop. I don't know. So again, the workshop is Sunday, July 27th, 2025, 4-hour workshop. The workshop is through Healthy Gamer with Dr. K, and you can click below. I almost said clink. You can click below for more information. Sign up now if you want.